Welcome to SMU Stories, the podcast where we dive into the journeys of remarkable alumni from Southern Methodist University who have excelled in the world of business. I'm your host, Mitch Brown, and each episode will uncover the secrets, challenges, and triumphs of this extraordinary individual. From entrepreneurs who've turned dreams into multi-million-dollar enterprises to executives leading global corporations, SMU has nurtured a community of innovators, leaders, and visionaries. Join us as we sit down with the alumni who have walked the same halls, studied in the same classrooms, and emerged as industry pioneers. Get ready for insights, inspiration, and actionable advice as we explore the unique SMU stories that have shaped the business landscape. Whether you're a current student, an aspiring entrepreneur, or simply curious about the power of the SMU network, this podcast is for you. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's embark on a journey through the compelling narratives of SMU alumni who are making waves in the business world. This is SMU Stories. Let's begin. SMU Stories is brought to you by Security National Bank of Texas, SMU Cox School of Business, Morrison Seeger Venture Capital Partners, and Hilltop Property Tax. Bill, thanks so much for joining us today. Really excited to tell your SMU story. If you would, introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is Bill Rowe. I run a company and founded a company called Rowe Global in the retained executive search space, specifically built around serving the private equity community, primarily recruiting C-suite leadership for the portfolio companies they own, and also within the family office community. We're based here in Dallas and offices around the U.S., around the globe. I graduated at SMU in 91, grew up in Maryland, and came here to go to SMU and never left.
Love it. And we were laughing a little bit before we started on your kind of origin story of picking SMU. So Maryland kid, Baltimore kid. Tell us a little bit about how SMU got on the radar, the timeline, and kind of how you ended up making that decision as what's now probably a very popular choice for the Northeast to find SMU, maybe not as common when you found the Hilltop.
No doubt about it, Mitch. I fully admit, growing up in the Mid-Atlantic, lacrosse was our religion. That was a big part of my life. I was pretty focused on probably playing that in college. Mm-hmm. Blew my knee out my junior year of high school, so then I knew I wasn't going to be playing college ball, and had spent some time in San Antonio due to my father's corporate job when I was a kid. We started ranching in western Colorado when I was about 15, mm-hmm. and I got a mother from northern Louisiana. So the South and the West had definitely dominated my world, mm-hmm. And I'm a lifelong Cowboys fan, even though I grew up in Maryland. My northern Louisiana relatives all were Cowboys fans, so I was raised as a Cowboy fan and still am. And so my mother gets credit as I was trying to figure out what I was really going to do and where I was going to go for mentioning, hey, I've always heard of this school called SMU. None of her, she was one of 8 back in Louisiana. None of them went to college. And she said, would you look at it? And so they offered me a chance to come down here for a day, October of my senior year of high school.
Okay.
12 years, all-boy prep school in Maryland. Massive graduating class of 48 guys. 15 of us had been together for 12 years. Right. And so I flew in for an afternoon, had an interview with the dean of admissions, saw definitely the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life come in and offer to give me a tour of the campus. And then 45 minutes later, 3 more gorgeous women give you a different tour. And by the end of that 3 hours, I still can't guarantee what heaven looks like. SMU at the Hilltop was pretty much convinced in my mind I had found heaven.
Right.
And so I went back and applied to 8 colleges, got into all of them. But we'll say not only was it just kind of the time, this was 87, 86, 87, but they did a great job at recruiting, right? I mean, I got into the University of Colorado and I got a 3x5 card in the mail. Hey, you've been accepted. Here's your dorm. Got into W&L, same thing, kind of little small note, right? You get that application response from SMU and it's this big package and it's a big red folder and there's this great letter. And they called. They were like, did you get your information? We really want you to come. Yeah. And as an 18-year-old, you're just like, hey, man, this place looks like a college is supposed to look like.
Right.
And they want me, right? That made a difference. It felt wanted. And I fully admit, coming out of a small private school, I was probably a little intimidated from the big state schools I got into.
Definitely.
And this seemed like a really welcoming environment. And I've continued to champion that for the last multiple decades. Dallas and SMU is the most open and welcoming society we have in the country.
Mm-hmm.
It's the secret sauce to Texas's success. And so that's how I chose it. That's how I ended up here. And yeah, to your point, I don't think there was maybe one other person from Maryland that was even in that freshman class.
Wow.
Very few from the Northeast. We were more dominated by Texas, had a good amount kind of St. Louis, a little bit of California, Colorado, kind of Central South and Midwest, but both coasts were not as heavily represented back then as they are today.
Yeah, and we'll kind of skip a little bit in the timeline of your career and kind of tie into where just SMU is today, right? And someone put it in such a well said conversation that is that SMU has like the charm of a college town, like the campus and kind of how you're insulated in Highland Park, that bubble. You feel like you're in a college town, but then you have the resources and everything you need in a massive metro, right? And so you've seen that evolve, and in your career in executive recruitment, like talk about a little bit about maybe like the evolution of Dallas, the quality of professionals, businesses that are here, and kind of how you've seen SMU evolve and grow with that.
Oh, yeah, great question, Mitch. I mean, look, I got here at the end of the 80s, right? And which also means I'm turning into one of the really old guys in the room who still thinks he's 25. When I got to Dallas in 87, Dallas had been a big part of the world, primarily because of the Dallas TV show, J.R. Ewing, all that. When I was driving in, there were still billboards on the highways then, come to South Fork, J.R. Ewing lives here. But as a city, the tollway ended about 400 yards north of Beltline Road. None of that growth up there existed. There was a big separation between Plano and everything else. And from a business perspective, definitely oil and gas was still a presence. We had a huge financial change that year, stock market meltdown in the fall of 87. We lost all the banks in Texas in that year. And so the makeup of what Dallas was in the midst of changing. There was much more distance between Dallas and Fort Worth. They were barbell cities with a lot of green in between.
Right.
What I've been blessed with since arriving then is kind of the continued growth and expansion of Dallas, of Texas. It was always our more cosmopolitan city of our five jewels of Texas. San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas. Those are Fort Worth. Those are our key centers.
Yeah.
But Dallas was always the more cosmopolitan mix.
Right.
And what I've witnessed after all these decades is, we've robustly diversified what companies we have here, the industries we have. We have more Fortune 500 headquarters here than any other place in New York.
Right.
We have the fastest growth of large company headquarters moving here of any place in the nation. And that's been the case most of my career.
Right.
And so fully admit, best decision of my life was SMU. Second best was Dallas. And finally, the most important was to remain in Texas. And I make the comment all the time, the best thing I ever did and the best gift I could ever give what is now my 3 young adult children is I created 3 native-born Texans. And I made the fatal mistake of marrying a Texan, so you don't get to leave anyways. So,
we'll rewind a little bit here, but you mentioned a couple great schools that you got into. SMU fit a few things. I think you love the idea of getting to Texas. The campus atmosphere fit what you thought the next 4 years needed to be for you. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to study? Or did you know I wanted to be in business? I wanted to, be a lawyer. Kind of what was 18-year-old Bill's mindset stepping on a campus outside of I'm going to make a bunch of friends and have a good time and experience the 4 years?
Yeah, no, it's another great question. I mean, I can honestly tell you, 12 years prep school, right? Came here, just, there was never a question of you're going to college, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to college and you're going to study and probably go into the business world.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, I came here with probably a less of a plan than the percentages back then that, some people knew they were going to study accounting. Some people knew they were going to be lawyers. Some people knew they were science majors.
Mm-hmm.
It was the minority. The majority was still, hey, look, I'm going to college, I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
I think as we look at the marketplace today, I think people do follow a track more today, and kind of have a plan. But I think it's because this parent generation is talking to their kids more about that. You know, my father was a 30+ year corporate guy, but I don't think I ever had a conversation about, hey, what should I study? You know,
Right.
I mean, so I showed up initially as a business undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and within the first, probably second semester, I was fairly disenfranchised with early general business study. I mean, if I had to take another economics class that was making me think about, you know, economic theory versus
Right.
how do you run a company,
Right.
is what I was trying to figure out. And
Yeah.
so, also probably due to a little bit of lack of interest in that, some of my grades suffered. So in trying to adjust my performance, I switched my degree to history. So I'm a
Yeah.
Dedman liberal arts grad, and then took every class I could in the business school that I thought was applicable to being in business. So
Yep.
finance, accounting, organizational behavior, you know, things that I thought were building blocks of how companies ran and business was
Mm-hmm.
done. And it was a little bit because where educationally we were in universities was different 40 years ago.
Right.
I still didn't have an exact plan of what that was going to lead to. My macro idea was, how do I get into the business world?
Right.
And the reason I chose history is it taught you how to research, it taught you how to present.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I was interested in it.
Yeah.
Texas history, European history. I mean, there were some great classes, tons of things fun to read, and
Right.
the research skills that I gained in that have served me really well in my whole
Yeah.
career.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. That was one thing that caught me off guard the first kind of couple months on campus, and I think it probably evolved over time as these kids have such a kind of tracked mind of how they get to the private equity world. And you know, so many kids that I came on campus with were 18 years old, like, okay, I know I'm going to get my Cox degree, I got to get this GPA, and then I'm going to get this internship, investment banking. And I was just like naive to that. It was incredible, and I think you probably see that more now.
9 out of 10 conversations today, and obviously having 3 that have recently finished college myself, everybody's got this plan and this focus. I can tell you 8 out of 10 of us in my freshman class, we were just focused on, man, you know, we're going to what is, you know, now the Barley House, and
Yeah.
Grubs, and we're going to what exists over there, and the next party and the next frat gathering, and you know, we had a really good time.
Friday to Friday.
You know, I had 2 years that we had no football, right? And we had soccer for homecoming, and so as the class of '91 has gathered a lot in the Boulevard over years, we've reminded everybody we got really good at having a really good time, but what we've also, because that, like, we knew everybody. That, back to your previous question, one of the things that, you know, why do you make that decision to go to SMU? First of all, it looks like what a college is supposed to look like, that Jeffersonian feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's big enough to have diversity, but it's small enough that, like, everybody knows everybody. You may not call everybody friend, but like, you recognize everybody.
Right.
There's so many different people in every one of your classes and studies that, like, the community is something that you immediately become part of. And, you know, if you go to a Texas or you go to a North Carolina or a Michigan, you know, there's 60,000 people there.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up in this small little slice of a subculture at the huge universities. Everybody at SMU is part of SMU. And you know, you end up being friends with somebody in a class that you may never see on the weekend, but because they've got different interests or different policies or whatever, but you're still friends. And it's been interesting, you know, having all these decades pass since I was going to college, how I've interacted with so many of those different people, years above and below me from college, that have impacted my career and my opportunities, that come out of that broad community. And while we're still a small school, right, 7,000 undergrad, whatever it is, we have huge impact. And if you really participate and are open to that, it's an amazing asset that you get at SMU that I don't think you get anywhere else.
Agreed. And I think it comes back to, like you said, Dallas and the trajectory that is, and people wanting to stay here. Where if you go to one of these other North Carolinas, how many people are staying in Chapel Hill, right? They're moving elsewhere. We're able to kind of compound that. Tell me a little bit about, and this will kind of help pivot into what you're doing in your work world, but like the importance of those soft skills, those things you learned as a liberal arts major, the research, the history. Like, are you seeing enough kids doing that these days? Is there looking at resumes? We talk about this on this show a decent bit with everyone who has that, and the ability to speak and kind of those skills instead of just being, hey, accounting focused. And those are great skills to have. But, are some of those other pieces, the histories, the English majors being kind of pushed to the wayside, even though they're so valuable to people's kind of greater skill set?
Yeah, look, I think they are. To our common point a few minutes ago, I think these days everybody seems to have so much more of a plan going to college. So maybe we've done a better job thinking about preparing everybody. Hey, look, you're going to college to like start your career, right? It's just to go to the frat party. And so I do see a much more defined path for everybody. And I guess I've also witnessed it. So my oldest was 27. As I mentioned to you before, he just finished his MBA there at SMU. His undergrad was Colorado School of Mines in engineering. My middle son went to Ole Miss, Toddy, and that's still the best 5 or 6 years of your life if you're at an SEC school. And he's probably a little bit more dad. He was general business, not really sure where that was going to take him. Kind of studied a lot of things.
Yep.
Daughter graduated Texas Tech this last year. Typical daughter, much more kind of driven, focused, finance major, summa cum laude, all that kind of stuff. And so she had a plan. I look at that. I look at their relative friend group that I've been exposed to, the other younger people I see. I think everybody does seem to enter college with more of a plan than we did back in the 80s. But I will tell you, I've witnessed each of them and a lot of their young friends I know, as much as they're focused on that degree, they are still taking some of those history classes, some of those English classes that are so beneficial to understand how to write, how to present. As I mentioned, my oldest, School of Mines is very engineering focused, right? It's a place for math and science kids.
Right.
And Austin is probably one of the most brilliant 27-year-olds I've ever met. And I say that not because he's my kid, I just have witnessed it.
Right.
That being said, he had to take some of those classes and gain some skills to know how to write, just a decent professional email. I mean, not a report, but like communicate well. Because everything was so numbers to him that getting comfortable putting a PowerPoint together, having a communication online, making a presentation, he needed some exposure to that. So I think it's really important, whatever the major is, marketing, whatever, they take some of those classes that give you some of those basic skills to communicate. Because as much as business is anything, it's knowing how to develop a relationship, knowing how to present information, how to gather that data and show it in a simple format for everybody to understand. And so I think the schools do a great job of intermixing that in all the areas of study.
Right.
And I commend SMU as much as anybody. It is an exceptional school today on a path to even greater academic capability. That we were a good school when I went there. And, that was a benefit to staying in Texas.
Yep.
But, hey, if you're an SMU grad, you're up there with as good a school as there is in the country.
Right.
Quality of the professors, the quality of the study is exceptional. And Turner's been a big part of that in the last 25 years. Chiefs has been a big part of that. Our leadership, our board has done an amazing job. There's no one who bleeds red, white, and blue more than I from a sports side. All of that comes to success and into fruition because of what we've done in building the business school and improving our facilities, bringing in great professors.
Yeah. So getting back to you, history major, tying in the business piece, you're very much interested in kind of still figuring things out. How did you find the executive search industry, and give us a little bit of the how it played out to where one day you were going to open Rowe Global and run your own executive search firm?
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. I like everybody, all of a sudden you're in the spring of your senior year and you're like, I've got college about to end. I need a real job. and again, back at that time, there was less internships, right? Again, the focus percentage of your class maybe had an internship the summer before their senior year, but nobody before their freshman, sophomore, junior, right? And so I'm in on-campus recruiting, taking advantage of the Career Center, have some interviews, meet some different companies, and have to admit I was fairly uninspired. Like, meet with the Equitable. I'm going to go sell insurance. Meet with the banking group, and you're going to get into the management training program. Or probably one of the worst was I was very excited to meet with Merck, right? Pharmaceutical sales, drug sales was a really hot thing in the late 80s, early 90s. So, great company, excelling, great stock. So I had this interview on campus there at the Career Center with probably somebody who drew the short straw at Merck to come interview undergrads, right? Big ego, probably 3 years out of college. And I got my suit on, and I've researched the company. I know what a stock closed yesterday. I know its earnings, everything else.
Yeah.
And I walk in, and like in the first 5 minutes, he's like, "So what do you know about our business?" And I started commenting about the general. He's like, "Yeah, no, what do you know about the business unit I represent?" And I'm like, "Nothing."
Yeah.
Nobody sent me a package ahead of time.
Right.
And he's like, "Well, you seem fairly unprepared." And then he looks at my resume, and I interned at a bank the summer before. And
Right.
I grew up around a ranch, right? So I grew up working on a ranch. And he looks at me and says, "So you worked on this ranch, like, so how many hours a week did you work?" And nobody had ever asked me that. I'm 22 years old. I'm like, "How many hours are there in a week?"
Right.
He's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Dude, we work sun up to sundown 7 days a week, and there's lights on that tractor if you're not done."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, I'm not sure how that applies to our business." And I was like, "You know what? This guy's a jerk. I'm done. Have a nice day." I got up and walked out. And was really like, how do I find a path into industry? Again, didn't study accounting. I didn't study finance. There wasn't this highway to those opportunities.
Yeah.
I was reading Forbes, 3-paragraph article about retained executive search. Talked about these firms that were hired by companies to go recruit specific roles. So call my father, 30-year consumer finance banking guy, worked at a big corporation. And I said, "Dad, what's this retained search thing?" He's like, "We use it every now and then. Other industries use it more than us, but companies hire our senior executives." Again, this is 91. No email, no internet, none of that existed.
Right.
And the search industry was much smaller. Korn Ferry, which is still considered the largest today, was less than a $100 million company then.
Wow.
And most of that industry, which was still very small, was populated by elder statesmen, executives that had spent 20 or 30 years in industry already, didn't probably excel in a leadership role, but knew a bunch of people and got into recruiting.
Right.
And my theory was that if I could get one of these search firms to hire me out of college, I could get exposed to how companies were structured, lots of different industries, what leadership looked like, and then I'd try to choose one to go into. And I figured it was a pathway to get into another industry.
Makes total sense.
Got a cup of coffee everywhere I could with every search firm that there ever was then. Everybody laughed. I mean, not like giggle. They laughed. They were like, "Look, we don't hire kids out of college."
Really? So in that career, it's always you got to have a Rolodex. You got to know some things.
At industry, that time, they just didn't need young folks, right? They wanted people that had a network. However, it was starting to change, and I was really fortunate that at the time, the 5th largest search firm in the world was called Paul Ray and Company, and it was headquartered in Fort Worth. And I got a cup of coffee with them. Told them what I was trying to do. And they did chuckle as well. But their comment literally was, "Look, we've never hired a kid out of college, but no one's ever asked. And so we'll give you a job, and if no good, we'll fire you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "That's a fair deal."
Right.
And so went to work straight out of SMU in June of 91 for Paul Ray and Company. And kept living in the village and driving to Fort Worth every day because Fort Worth of 91 isn't quite what Fort Worth is today. And there was a lot more fun for a 22-year-old in Dallas.
Absolutely. And so that was still kind of your commitment going in, hey, I'm going to do this for a few years and I'm going to find manufacturing or XYZ industry and I'm going to work my way to use my connections there.
It would lead to something. And to be very honest, how I end up staying in it all these years was blown away within the first couple of months of my job. You start in research, right? So you're supporting the partners that are working with these clients. And all of a sudden I find myself, supporting projects in New York. We're doing work for Goldman Sachs. Supporting a client in Chicago, the big industrial manufacturers. We did work for aerospace defense companies in Texas. We did work for software companies in California. And the access we had, that all of a sudden you're in the room with the C-suite, the CEO, the board, and you're hiring the next CEO, or they're hiring the next EVP of X. And they're asking you to go out and pull the best and the brightest that aren't thinking about ever making a job change today.
Right.
Tap them on the shoulder and say, would you look at this? Would you consider this opportunity?
Right.
It was, as I call that, the art of the hunt. That was infectious. Can I achieve that goal of recruiting this person?
Yeah.
Then further was, on the hook that we were having a real impact, right? The leadership makes all the difference in these companies. And you start to understand the importance of hiring the right people and the culture they build, the impact they have. And so, probably a couple of years in, I was like, this has kind of got my attention. I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I guess it was right at 3 years, I got a call from a group of executives that had taken the executive search practice of KPMG private. The search industry got started by what used to be the big 8 accounting and tax firms.
Okay.
They all had to get out of it. The SEC said they no longer could own search. And so a group of the partners in the U.S. at KPMG took it private and rebranded it Foster Partners, headquartered in New York, and they had no presence in Texas. And they called a 26-year-old kid and said, "We got your name." Same calls I was making every day.
Right.
And would you consider joining us and giving us a presence in Texas? So they gave me a chance to be an equity owner and be a partner. And we had cut a deal to be co-located still where KPMG existed in any city that we went into.
Oh, nice.
At that time, KPMG was in the Crescent.
Yep.
And so I joined them. My job was to build a team and grow a presence here. We built that firm from 5 U.S. offices to 7, from 11 countries to 21 over a 10-year period. And I got really lucky to end up building Dallas into our largest revenue practice, the whole firm, serving all industries and all disciplines.
Is it the same mentality building your own team and firm as it is the way you treat your clients? You kind of are doing the same. You're kind of now doing it yourself.
Yeah, you're being in recruiting and it's a little bit like the doctor's the worst patient.
Yeah.
So you try to remember what you preach to your clients all day long. But a lot of it's, again, I think like any part of business, it's relationship driven. How do you find people with common interest, common passion for how they approach their job and their work? And I've had all sorts of different people work with me and around me and work with folks. And those platforms at the time, Paul Ray, Foster Partners, then had the chance to take what I'd built at Foster and join forces with a former competitor and a friend that had run the 3rd largest search firm, sold it and retired here, convinced him to come and join with me and lend me his name. And we built a firm called Pearson. Bob, former McKinsey, early in his career, an entrepreneur, and then really successful in the search business. We came together to build Pearson, this time Dallas headquartered business.
Okay.
May of 2002. And that was our first cut at saying we're going to build something that's specifically focused on serving the private equity community.
Okay.
And I was really blessed to have him, again, as a partner and somewhat of a mentor. He was elder statesman that had already succeeded in his life and was willing to still play in the game and be a partner with me. My job was to run the P&L and grow that. We grew that for 11 years. I was proud of what I built there. There was some family on his side that ended up in the business. And so our strategic desires, what we're trying to do with that business, kind of divided. And so that's where, going on 13 years ago now, I felt I had enough fuel to step out and create a really creative name of Rowe Global. Would be honest to say I probably should have done that in 2002.
Really?
And probably maybe would have optimized more where I took my career just as an owner, if I had started then versus, 11 years later. However, great partners, great ethical guys, learned a ton from Bob.
Right.
His son was also my partner. He joined us, and they were good guys. And I'm very proud of the firm I was part of building there. But yes, in terms of scratching that itch to be an entrepreneur, wish I'd have done it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And would tell any young person, I think it's really important to start your career learning from others, get in a culture, work at a company. But
Mm-hmm.
if you really have a desire to be part of, um, you know, having something that's yours, the sooner you take that risk and jump out and try to build something that you're responsible for, I think the better. Because I just think it's a dynamic environment to serve.
Yeah. You touch on kind of how you enjoyed the research component of it, getting to know what these businesses need, having access to the executive level and be an important part to their companies, but then also kind of the art of convincing that target to come over there, right? So when do you have a story, or kind of, was there a time when it kind of clicked that you're like, hey, I'm good at this. I like, either I love the pressure of trying to convince someone to come over here, or was it one specific deal or account that you're like, hey, if I just got this guy and I never thought I'd be able to do it, that you're like, hey, this is a good fit for my personality, what I'm good at.
Um, so I'll again try not to have too many run-on sentences here. I'll really kind of maybe three different iterations throughout these years that answers that question. First, yeah, I mean, that opportunity post Paul Ray to actually, get recruited and get, promoted, whatever you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
say, that felt good. And I felt like I was getting better at what I was doing, and
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing some of those rewards, and I was enjoying that. So that's kind of why you stayed in it. Um, you know, Flash forward a few years later, and you're starting to think about, do I stay here? Do you go to work for a bigger firm? Do you go do something different? What am I
Mm-hmm.
good at? Um, I guess I was still really enjoying the client service side of it. I just from a personality perspective, I like to solve problems. I like to help, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what our industry is built around.
Yeah.
But there was a real defining moment of I still pretty self-effacing. Like I think there's a lot of people that are great at what I do, and
Yeah.
I don't think I'm the best by any means. Just been really blessed with great client relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment in the early 2000s that, of all things, I ended up getting referred to a client that was in the Indy racing world. I guess it's late 90s. CART used to be the dominant U.S.-based open-wheel racing
Okay.
firm. They had a big civil war with that ownership, and Tony George, who at that time owned the Indy Motor Speedway, left CART, took the Indy 500 with him, and started a new league called the Indy Racing League.
Okay.
The only major team to leave CART and go with him was a group called Gallus Racing out of New Mexico. And Rick Gallus had all the top drivers. Him and Penske were like the two big teams back then.
Okay.
Al Unser Jr. drove for him, won the Indy 592 driving for Gallus. And so they were building this new league. He was having to rebuild his team, and I got referred to him, all things. And they needed to hire a new chief marketing officer for this racing organization. And when we got it all done, I found myself at the Indy 500 a couple weeks before the race on testing weekend with this race team owner. I've met the owner of the speedway and the league. We've hired this new chief marketing officer. The chief marketing officer of all of PepsiCo was there that I had talked to, wasn't right for the role, but made a connection and meeting with Gallus about maybe doing some other things.
Yeah.
And I'm in the infield at the Indy 500 at this conversation, and Rick Gallus looks at me and goes, "Man, Rowe, we're all here because you made this happen. You're the glue that put everybody in this room."
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that moment I was like, I never really thought about that.
Right.
It's pretty cool. And I'm maybe, I don't know, 28 at that point, 29.
Wow.
And I'm going, yeah, this is pretty cool. This is kind of like I would have never expected to meet those people. I would have never expected to be in those environments. God forbid I would expect to have a business meeting in a, $1 million trailer at the 8,500, right?
Right.
And so those types of access, those types of experience. Look, I've been in dirty, nasty industrial manufacturing plants. I've been in software company. I've been in every geography of the world. I've recruited people overseas. But that was a moment that definitely, call it 10 years into your career, you're like, yeah, I think this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the footnote on that was more recent. Again, my kids are now, young adults, and they made a comment to me about 2 years ago. They said, Dad, do you even like what you do? And I said, why do you ask that? I said, well, you bitch a lot. and I admit, it's like, this is driving me nuts. I'm working 20 hours a day. And I stopped for a minute and I thought about it. I looked at them. I said, guys, I wouldn't have done this for 33 plus years if I didn't like it.
Right.
But more so, the opportunities I've been given, the experiences I've had from working with so many different dynamic companies, variety of geographies, industries, disciplines, has been amazing. And I'm not sure I could have done that doing anything else.
Right.
A little bit like being in the consulting world, a little bit like being in the investment banking world, private equity world. You just get so much exposure. And you never know where it's going to take you. I mean, I tell young people all along, look, don't be scared of taking any job.
Right.
Just get engaged. Just start paddling. You never know who you're going to meet. And especially if, circle with this background, SMU was the single greatest decision I made. The community we've built there, people I met older than me, younger than me, the people I've met throughout these years by staying involved with the university. Me and my best friend and a couple other buddies have had the same spots on the boulevard since we started the boulevard.
Amazing.
We're right at that stop sign across from the IPC. We've got 6 spots there, kind of in a shape of an L. We've had our giant smoker out there that we built in '93 when we were just out of college.
Wow.
We serve like 400 people a game.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that when we were, 1 and 9.
Yeah.
And being involved makes all the difference.
Yep. So little PSA for Rowe Global. You talk about all these industries and things you've done in your career. Is there a specific focus you guys have now, and kind of what are you guys doing? What inning are you in? Where kind of does the company sit today?
Yeah, no, we're very blessed. I mean, for the last 23 years, from form, function, design, and everything we've built this place to primarily work with private equity. And so the majority of our assignments are to recruit CEOs, CFOs, presidents of portfolio companies owned by PE. That fits me well because every fund kind of invests in different sectors.
Right.
So some of those could be oil and gas companies. Some of those could be technology companies, supply chain, transportation, manufacturing, consumer products, beverage, you name it. We're based here in Dallas, office in Denver, Seattle, Florida, DC, 6 offices in Canada, couple in Europe. We're in China. Those global locations are joint ventures. I don't own that brick and mortar, nor do I want to. But folks like me that operate underneath our umbrella and do work the way we do. And so we're a boutique firm. Our direct competition is Korn, Heidrick, Spencer, the big firms you see on TV. And obviously we think we're better, but we're not trying to build the next big firm.
Yeah.
What I can honestly say we're blessed with is we have clients that we work with today, PE funds that we've worked with for 20 years, 25 years, private companies we've worked with for 25 years. They've stayed with us through these company evolutions. And what we really are good at is spending the time to understand who they are. Because in the search world, it should be a given that when you're retained to recruit for a role, you've got to find people with a specific skill set. But our real role is how do we find someone that fits the culture of that company?
Right.
And is this the right place for them at this point in their career? Does that geography work? Does this size company work? And we take the time to do that. So longer maybe PSA than I should have.
No, that was quick. That was great. And I know we can maybe save it for another conversation, or we'll have you come speak to our, members at a luncheon and kind of talk about career advice and how people can kind of map out their careers. Cause I know that deserves its own kind of focus. But would be remiss if I didn't ask you kind of in your time, or as those listening, those who maybe aspire to be at the C-suite or executive level, kind of what are some big ticket items they should think about as they carve their career? I know it can be so industry specific and there's not a lot of blanket statements you can make, but kind of last little bit of advice for those aspiring to be C-suite executive level folks, whether at a portfolio business or, their own, kind of internal career work up in their firms.
So maybe three general, pieces of advice that I think are kind of bullet points. Maybe the most important is never stop learning.
Okay.
Whether you're 22 or 55, you never have all the answers. There's a lot of smart people, lots of places. 10 other people are always smarter than you are. Spend time, glean information, listen, learn, have experience, and seek out other folks that are smarter in certain categories, certain sectors that can give you insight and advice. So and when I say never stop learning, I don't mean necessarily book learning. It's, open yourself up to experiences and environments,
right?
So you can be taught and adding to your skill set all the time. Second, mentorship's really important. Find folks that have been there and done that. Spend some time around that. Don't be scared to ask questions. There's no dumb question, and there's nobody expects you to have all the answers, especially at 22.
Right.
There's certain questions you're especially not going to answer at 55, but in between that, like you're developing, right? So just keep learning. Find some people that will be good sources of mentorship and advice, and then if you want to end up in a leadership role, be open to new ideas, thinking outside the box, and probably as much as anything, it's a work ethic. Which is probably the biggest thing we've changed in this country over my lifetime. Just dig in. There was never a question when we were first starting our careers, can I work from home, or how much vacation do I get, or, do I, what are the day? How long are the days, or
right.
Self-help time? We showed up early, we stayed late, we jumped on airplanes, whatever we could do,
right.
You just dug in. And I think if you look at any of these great examples of entrepreneurs we've all witnessed over this explosion of industry, especially in the tech world for the last 25 years, those people that have impacted the world, they're driven by what they do, and they're constantly moving and learning and adding, and they're not just punching a clock. And so be willing to do all that.
I love it. Bill, thank you so much for making the time, sharing your story. We'll send everyone out in the 1911 group to your boulevard and to your tailgate. Make sure they're well fed. Excited for the next football season, and excited to have you back on and keep learning from you.
Mitch, thank you for the time. Go Ponies. Please, everybody keep coming out. The future's bright. We just brought in maybe what is going to be the next great president in the history of college leadership in the world. We've got a football team that's got momentum behind it. We got a basketball program that's evolving back up. And most importantly, we got a board that is committed to the future of the school and a city that's on fire. And I couldn't be prouder to be part of it, and hope everybody gets involved.
Love it. Thanks for your time, Bill. Talk to you soon.